CGI is coming to WWE. No, that's not a name of a new character appearing on Raw, SmackDown, or NXT. That is computer generated imagery. Yes, Dave Meltzer is reporting that CGI will be involved in the eye for an eye match between Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins at the horror show at Extreme Rules. Dave Meltzer said, quote, "The idea is to do a taped match and use some form of CGI effects to simulate an eye being pulled out as the finish," end quote. This is just crazy, isn't it? This is nuts. I posted a tweet on Twitter saying that this was weird, and it is weird. It's certainly different, isn't it? Where'd you start with it? I mean, I've seen a lot of people saying, why not have a street fight? Why not have a last man standing match? I don't think it would have been the right thing to do a street fight or a last man standing match, purely because this whole feud has been centered around the eye injury, right? It all started with Seth Rollins losing to Drew McIntyre at Money in the Bank, and then the following night on Raw, pushing Rey Mysterio's eye into the steel steps, trying to pierce his eye, not necessarily rip it out, but certainly preventing from seeing it ever again. So I don't think a street fight really... I don't know. I don't think a street fight would suit, or a last man standing would suit. We just had a last man standing match at WrestleMania between Randy Orton and Edge, so I'm not necessarily sure that would have fit here. It's just the feud has been so centered around this eye injury and the the metaphorical eye for an eye, and now the literal eye for an eye. I guess this stipulation is fitting. It suits. It's out there. It's really, really weird. And before I go into any of my sort of criticisms of it and sort of the negativity that is surrounding it, I must say first, I do praise the creativity of WWE here. Now, how often do we say that things are, so samey, and we've seen it before and they've done it before? In just a couple of weeks ago on SmackDown, right, we had that segment between Jeff Hardy and Sheamus, the old urine segment, which was literally, even the words used and the verbiage used was literally a rip-off of a segment that they'd done in 2006. At least here they're trying to do something different, trying to do something that hasn't been done before. It's certainly creative and it's certainly outside of the box. So I will give them praise for that. It's not all going to be negativity here. As far as Extreme Rules then, when you think about this match, so said Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer, is reporting that CGI is going to be used, it's going to be taped prior, and then the CGI effects are going to be added on top of it. This would imply that we're going to get two cinematic matches at Extreme Rules, right? Because the Wyatt swamp fight between Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt, that's certainly going to be taped outside the Performance Center in the swamp, wherever it's going to be in Florida. So that's going to be taped, and that's going to be shot in a cinematic wrestling style. So that's going to be the same here for Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins. Now, I don't think that's going to be as, this match, the eye for an eye match, I don't think that's going to be as cinematic as the Wyatt Swamp fight, because it's going to be a match in the ring, in between the ropes. I think it's going to be similar to how they did the greatest wrestling match ever between Edge and Randy Orton at Backlash, in that it's a normal match that is taped in the ring, and then the CGI effects will just come right at the end. I don't think it's going to be completely cinematic style shot, and with separate cuts, etc., a soundtrack over the top, no commentary and all of that stuff. I don't think that's going to be the case with this one. I think we're going to get a normal match, and just the CGI is just going to be involved in the finish. It's not going to have separate takes. It's not going to be anything like that. So I think we almost get like 1.5 cinematic matches, right? We get the full cinematic match with the Wyatt Swamp fight between Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman, and then we get the cinematic finish to the Seth Rollins versus Rey Mysterio eye for an eye match. I don't think we get two full cinematic matches. It does obviously bring up the question about the cinematic matches and the cinematic finishes that we're going to see here. That, is it too much? We're getting a cinematic match at every pay-per-view now. You got to remember, around the time of WrestleMania, when that aired earlier this year, the cinematic style to have the Boneyard match and to have the Firefly Funhouse match was kind of a necessity. It was kind of WWE backed into a corner with the pandemic, and to make these matches work and to get the most out of these matches, they shot them in a cinematic style. It really, really, really worked. Both matches were great. And then ever since, we've seen lots of other cinematic matches. We've seen the Money in the Bank match that was shot cinematic, the corporate Money in the Bank match. We obviously saw I don't think the greatest wrestling match ever between Edge and Randy Orton was really cinematic, to be honest. Obviously, it had cinematic elements, but the real cinematic match at that show was a match that wasn't a match, and that was the segment between the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders. So obviously WWE is doubling down when it comes to these cinematic elements to the show. Will they wear thin quickly? Possibly. I think it's them trying to do something different due to the situations and the circumstances in which they're in right now. Will they continue? Will these cinematic style matches continue once we're back in arenas full of people? I don't know, because I don't know if an arena full of 10, 15, 20,000 people would be willing to sit through a 30-minute match that's just on the screen. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. They've done it in the past when it comes to boiler room brawls, etc. And they just, back in the day, right, they used to have the little TV out at ringside, didn't they? So I don't know. That'll be something to discuss at a later time, I suppose. Now, in terms of Rey Mysterio in this match, obviously his contract is still expired at the moment. He's working on a handshake deal under the terms of his previous contract. So it would make logical sense if Rey Mysterio is going to lose this match, I suppose. He's already got the eye injury. So for me, if I had to make a prediction now, obviously things will change over the next 7 days or so. But if I had to make a prediction now, I would probably say Seth Rollins is likely the one to win here. If Mysterio is currently working without a contract, it would make sense for him to have such a debilitating injury, such as having your eye ripped out of your skull, and then he can go away, sort out his contract, and then miraculously come back with a new eye. Honestly, this is just insane. I think Dominic obviously is going to be involved in this one. Perhaps maybe they both get their eyes ripped out. Father and son eye gouging. It's a father and son activity that's it's out there. I'm putting it out there. But as a prediction, I think Seth Rollins will win this one and leave Extreme Rules with both eyes intact. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I was thinking this when it comes to Rey Mysterio having his eye pulled out if he were to lose this match, because that's how you win this match, right, folks? You have to have your eye ripped out by your opponent. What happens if Seth Rollins rips out Mysterio's good eye, right? So Mysterio's got the eye patch still of his previously injured eye, and then Mysterio gets his other eye pulled out by Seth Rollins. He fully becomes Daredevil, right? We saw Rey Mysterio cosplay as Daredevil at WrestleMania 19, was it? Maybe he fully becomes Daredevil. He is the blind, sort of half-an-eyed wrestler. It does. I mean, I joke about it there, but it does raise quite logistical issues when it comes to the character, right? In the sense that, how do you come back from this? How do you come back from having your eye ripped out of your head? Because once your eye is completely pulled out, I mean, I'm talking, because the way they're trying to portray this and the way they're hyping this up is that the way to win it isn't just like you pop the eye out of the socket. They're talking as if at the end of the match, either Seth Rollins or Rey Mysterio is going to be holding physically the opponent's eye in their hand, and that's how you win the match. That's how you ring the bell, is that you rip the eye out. And once your eye is completely pulled out, I mean, there's no replacing that, right? I mean, I know we've seen circumstances in professional wrestling in which eyes have actually popped out. I think of, Vader. He got his eye punched or pulled out by Stan Hansen in Japan, and it was popped back in, and obviously he still had two eyes. But that was just popped out the socket slightly. If it's pulled out of the socket slightly, it can be popped back in, right? You might have a bit of a wandering eye, but that's what that is. But if it's fully pulled out, like Seth Rollins has Rey Mysterio's eye in his hands, does that mean Rey Mysterio is going to be legitimately blind in one eye? And I mean, to be honest, what a sentence that is. If Seth Rollins pulls out Rey Mysterio's eye, will he be blind? That is the scenario we are discussing right now for a wrestling match. I mean, wow. And I like cinematic wrestling. I like it a lot. Like I mentioned, the Boneyard match is one of my favourite matches of this year. But in terms of a WrestleMania main event, it's the best WrestleMania main event since probably WrestleMania 31. And I enjoyed the Firefly Funhouse match, not as much as the Boneyard match. That's obviously up to opinion. I enjoyed the Corporate Money in the Bank match. I thought that was fun. Again, I'm not really saying the greatest wrestling match ever was a cinematic match, so I won't really put that there. But I'm a big fan of cinematic wrestling. I think when it's done well, it's really good. It's different to what we're used to seeing in the ring, especially from a WWE point of view, where you think of the amount of content you have to watch if you're a WWE fan every week. 3 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Friday, 2 hours on Wednesday, and then let alone if you watch the other shows like a main event or whatever. That's a lot of content, 205 Live. So there's a lot of content to watch. So having something shot slightly differently and presented slightly differently in a cinematic style really is a breath of fresh air. It's something different to the real people that don't like watch wrestling but don't like watching wrestling, if you know what I mean. It almost feels like you're watching a TV show as opposed to a wrestling show, and I know that might rub some people the wrong way, but some people like that presentation. I said I'm a big fan of cinematic wrestling, but this is a bit strange for me. Like I said, I don't think it's a full cinematic match. I think, you know, the meat and potatoes of this match is going to be your traditional standard wrestling match in between the ropes. I don't know if, surely, I mean, this is something to consider as well. If the way to win the match is to rip the eye out of your opponent, like what? There can't be disqualifications, right? So I'm assuming there are no disqualifications, no countouts or anything of that nature, because, I mean, it would just be stupid, wouldn't it, right? You know, the way to win the match is to rip the eye out, but you get disqualified for a low blow. I mean, come on, I don't think, or you don't break the submission hold by 5 when they get to the rope. So I'm assuming there are no disqualifications or anything like that. I mean, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Like I said, it's odd. It's an odd stipulation, and it's a weird stipulation for me. And I know the counter argument to this, and the counter argument to the whole eye for an eye stipulation is like, we're living in the wrestling reality where AJ Styles was buried alive at WrestleMania. He was covered in what must have been like nearly a ton of dirt, with his weird plastic hand sticking out of the mud at WrestleMania, and then he returns a few weeks later like nothing happened. Like, oh yeah, I was buried alive, but I got out fine. You know, we're living in that reality where certain things like that just don't have to be explained. Why? Because it's professional wrestling. That's how it works, right? It's a fantasy bubble that we live in. I mean, how many times has The Undertaker quite literally died and then come back to life? But I would argue that's slightly different because that's his character. He is the undead. It's not like AJ Styles being buried alive and then coming back like he's completely fine a few weeks later. So, yeah, I mean, some people won't like that sort of leap out of the realms of what is real and what isn't, but look, it's professional wrestling, I suppose. The interesting thing I think here as well is the CGI element to it. What is WWE CGI going to be like? From what I recall, have they ever done any like proper high quality CGI before? Obviously, WWE is famous for stunts and things of that nature, props, makeup, anything like that. But have they done any full-on CGI before? I can't recall off the top of my head. So it's going to be interesting to see what they pull off and how they pull it off. It's going to have to be a pretty quick turnaround as well, to be honest. I mean, Extreme Rules is what, next Sunday? So again, you're going to have to get that done quickly, because if it's taped this week, you're giving yourself a week or less to get this CGI done. And that's difficult. Good CGI takes time to be good. You think about all of these high quality and high production Hollywood movies, you think of all the Marvel movies, all the CGI that goes into that, and I'm not saying that Seth Rollins versus Rey Mysterio's finish is going to have the CGI of a Avengers Endgame or anything to that extent. But what I'm saying, it takes time. You know, in some cases when it comes to these blockbuster movies, it takes like a year or longer to get the CGI right. And I know this is just going to be a little finish, so they could necessarily do it in the turnaround of a week. But even if it's a small thing, like an eye, if the CGI comes across as bad or not real even in the slightest, then for me that ruins the whole match. As good or as bad as the match inside the ring is, if at the end of the match we look at that finish and go, man, that CGI was awful, like it would take you completely out of it, and then it just doesn't work. I mean, you got to think, how many times have you been watching a movie? I mean, think back to the Justice League. If you're a fan of the superhero genre, or or you're a fan of DC movies, you think back to the CGI that was on the Justice League with Superman and CGIing out his mustache, right? As soon as everyone saw that, the movie was terrible. I mean, the movie was terrible anyway, but as soon as they saw that, they went, oh, I'm completely out of it. What is going on with this guy's face? And it's going to be the same here. If Seth Rollins pulls out the eye of Rey Mysterio and has it in his hand, and you have this thing in his hand that doesn't resemble an eye in the slightest, or even looks a bit like an eye but it's just so comically bad, it's going to take you out of it. It's just going to taint the whole match, because the match might be great, but then all you will remember is that weird finish where a guy had what was meant to be an eye in his hand but looked nothing like it. So the CGI is really, really important. And I don't doubt Seth Rollins versus Rey Mysterio in the ring will be great. It will be great because look at them. They're two fantastic wrestlers. They're two fantastic superstars. Every time they've ever been in the ring with each other, which I can't recall that many times, to be honest, but every time they have been in the ring together, their chemistry's great. They're great workers. The match in between the ropes, I have no doubts it's going to be phenomenal. Phenomenal. A tremendous match. But the CGI, it's going to take time. It's going to take time, and it needs to be done well. If you're a fan here of CGI on YouTube, then I definitely recommend to go check out Corridor Digital. They have a separate sort of vlogging channel called Corridor Crew. You can see behind the scenes how difficult and how much work it is required to make CGI look good, and how much thought has to go into it to make CGI look good. Now, I'm not saying I think Vince McMahon or Bruce Pritchard is going to be on their computer on After Effects trying to work out how to do some good CGI for the eye in this match. I would assume that they would put it to their digital department, production department, or if they want to make it really good, outsource it to a company like a Corridor Digital or a CGI special effects company to make this look good. But again, it's time. That is the biggest issue. If you ever watch a Corridor Digital video or a Corridor Crew video, you see that the biggest issue when it comes to CGI is time. Because a lot of the time frame is so small that they have to cut corners, they have to do what they can, they have to try and make it as good as they can in the small amount of time in which they're given. And that's going to be the case here, I think. It's just a case of whether is it going to look good or is it going to look really bad. Because I just think that the CGI, that is what is going to make this match or not, right? The stipulation is so ridiculous. The stipulation is so out there and so over the top, and people are already kind of laughing a little bit at it, or, I mean, if you pardon the pun here, rolling their eyes at it slightly. That if the CGI does come across as bad or tacky or just not realistic in the slightest, then it's just going to take you out of it completely. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. But if Seth Rollins, right, I thought this scenario, if Seth Rollins were to lose the match, or I suppose Rey Mysterio as well, but I think it will work quite nicely with Seth Rollins. So say, for example, Seth Rollins does get his eye ripped out. He would then, right, need, as I mentioned earlier in the video, to have one eye for the rest of his career, because that's how it works in real life. You can't just have your eye ripped out and be in someone else's hand, and then a few weeks later be walking around with two eyes like nothing happened and say, oh yeah, it grew back, right? Or, no, I popped it back in. I went to the top medical guy in the world, top eye specialist in the world, and he just popped it back in. It was sorted. So they'd have to work around this, right? And this would have to be a permanent character change to, say, Seth Rollins' character for his entire career going forward. So what they could do, I think, is maybe portray this like a glass eye. Say that, oh, I have to work with one eye now, I've got one glass eye in. And this is a bit like, I mentioned this on Twitter, this is a bit like the arc that Thor had in the last few Avengers and Thor movies. So in Thor Ragnarok, Thor gets his eye ripped out by Hela. So he's walking around with one eye, he wears an eye patch for a while. And then in Infinity War, he gets given a sort of it's a glass eye, but it's sort of a futuristic glass eye because it works and functions like a normal eye. But he gets given a glass eye by Rocket in Infinity War, but it's a different colour. So you always know that Thor still got one eye. The other one, that is a separate colour, that is the fake eye. And it's just a little nod and reminder that Thor's only got one eye, but the other eye is fake. I think they could do that here with Seth Rollins. Now, hear me out. So maybe that could work for Seth Rollins. Maybe Seth Rollins or Rey Mysterio gets their eye ripped out. They wear an eye patch for a while. Then they say they've been given a glass eye. And then what they actually do is they just wear one contact lens in that eye that changes the eye colour. Whether it's to brown, blue, red, green, whatever they want to do it to, they wear one contact lens in that eye, gives it a different color, and then going forward forever, because that's how permanent this character change or this little aesthetic change would have to be. Because if you did get your eye ripped out, that's a permanent consequence on your eye. They would have to wear this contact lens for the rest of their career to have this different colored eye. And I think that would be a way around it. So that, I have a glass eye. In reality, obviously, he's still got his eyes. I'm not going to actually rip it out. It's not a shoot. It's not backyard wrestling. He could just wear the different coloured contact lens, and then that could work going forward as a little reminder that he had his eye once ripped out on pay-per-view or on the network for $9.99. or free for news. It's not even free for news subscribers anymore. It's just free. I don't think they do the pay-per-views there, but I think that look might actually work. I think that would be quite cool. Maybe I'm just giving them a bit too much logic there. Maybe this match, it just doesn't have any logic, right? Maybe that's the whole point, is that it's not meant to have any logic. I don't know. But it's interesting, I suppose, in a sort of morbid curiosity way, right? It's the rubberneck effect. This is going to be so, like, you have to watch. To be honest, maybe this is a bit like the greatest wrestling match ever. Like, that tagline was so over the top and so ridiculous and so eye-rolling that people kind of went, I've got to watch it because I just got to see what they're going to do, because can they actually live up to it, or how are they going to pull this off? And I think this is the same thing here, right? With the eye for an eye match between Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio at Extreme Rules, that it's so ridiculous and it's so over the top. Someone is going to have their eye ripped out on pay-per-view it's just a bit like, I've got to watch it. I've got to watch it, because either it's going to be pulled off and I'm going to go, how on earth did they pull that off? That was great. Or it's going to be really bad and I'm going, what on earth was that? What have I just watched? So you've got to watch. You've got to watch. And I suppose the reaction, was slightly the same when they had the first Inferno match between The Undertaker and Kane in 98, right? When they first said, the only way to win this match is by setting your opponent on fire. Again, imagine we had social media at the time during the Monday Night Wars. But imagine we had social media then. Imagine the reaction there would have been if online, when they made the announcement, the only way to win the match is to have the opponent set on fire. I can imagine Twitter would have exploded. What the hell is this? You'd have had Dave Meltzer doing tweets saying we're going to have CGI, we're going to have flamethrowers, we're going to have all of this stuff. And in reality, it worked. It worked. They pulled it off. The match was great. The match was cool. You had Kane put his arm under the ring when they put a load of flammable liquid on his arm, and he sets his arm on fire, and that's the match. And it was good. It was a historic moment. They pulled it off. It was done well. It actually made sense, as much as a match can make sense, in the sense of, setting your opponent on fire and arson. But it worked. So maybe they can pull it off here. Until I see it, I will give it the benefit of the doubt, like you should at home. Give it the benefit of the doubt until we see it. And then once we see the final product and what they present to us, then we can say whether it's good or bad. But at the moment, it's getting people talking, and that's the purpose of it. So I'm interested to see what they do, and interested to see what and how they pull off. I will certainly be keeping my eye, there you go, on it. Just the amount of eye puns that I keep thinking of now, or I've seen online. CGI, right? After the CG, use the word eye. So we've got CGI. I'll be keeping my eye on it. It's eye rolling. I, for one, can't wait to see it. I mean, honestly, I could probably do like another 20 minutes here with eye puns. It's ridiculous. But anyway, I will stop the eye puns there. What do you think? What are your thoughts on CGI being used in the eye for an eye match between Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins at the Horror Show at Extreme Rules? Who do you think is going to win the match? How do you think they're going to pull off this eye being ripped out of the opponent's head? How do you think they're going to continue it going forward? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be another subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms on the screen right now. That's at 365Wrestle on Twitter and at Wrestle News 365 on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'm sure I'll speak with you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.